Okay, 2 days ago we were learning about the dinim of Sifrei Kodesh. We were discussing the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah that person has an obligation to do. But nowadays the poskim write, we do it by buying svarim and so on and so forth. So now there's a Gemara, the Gemara calls it Pasik. Tzikasi Amedes La'ad. The Gemara says that if a person buys svarim and lends them to other people to learn, so then his righteousness is forever because many people gain by it. So there's an interesting halacha thing with when you buy a Sefer Torah and you give it to the shul. So you buy a Sefer Torah and you give it to the shul. So there was a whole shaila, somebody in Poskim bring down, a person bought a Sefer Torah, he gave it to the shul, and then he moved, so he wanted to take the Sefer Torah with him to a different place. And it was a whole shaila in halacha if he's allowed to take it. The shul said, no, you can't take it, it's our Sefer Torah, you're taking it. He said, no, I never gave it to you. I lent it to you. So B'chlau, it's interesting, halacha is brought down, then when you when you buy a Sefer Torah, you want to give it to the shul. So the ideal way of doing it is you're not giving it to the shul, you're lending it to the shul. Then you have a question with the IRS, can you legally get a tax deduction from it? Because if you're not donating it to the shul, then you're not getting a tax deduction because not a donation, it's yours, you're just lending it to the shul. But leave it to the Jews, they figure out, all the ways how to do it. But in Allah, it's an interesting thing. Either you donate it to the shul, then ideally it belongs to the shul. Unless if you say, I'm not donating it to the shul, I'm lending it to the shul. Then you have an issue, can you take a tax deduction? Well, that's a separate story. Now, Sefer Torah is so holy, you're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah, even if you have a lot of Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah. There's only two things you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah for. That's if somebody needs money to get married, and he doesn't have money, and he only has a Sefer Torah, and he wants to sell a Sefer Torah to be able to get married, or to learn Torah. Under certain circumstances, which is not very clear in halacha, but this is generally not mentioned in halacha, that to build a mikvah, you could also sell a Sefer Torah to build a mikvah, but that's not such an easy din, not everybody agrees with it, it's not under all circumstances and so on. Okay, what? Pinyin Shvuim is, that's the most important thing. We're talking about normal Pinyin Shvuim, you could sell everything. But we're talking about, generally speaking, it's only Lisa Ishvalim Moitera, or certain people say to build a mikveh, things like that. Now, a person has to have a tremendous respect for Svarim. For instance, when the Sefer Torah is being moved around, you have to stand up, and you're not allowed to sit down until the Sefer Torah is in its proper place. You have to get up and follow the Sefer Torah. Now, even all the other Svarim also, besides the Sefer Torah, you also have to treat with a lot of respect, which means if a Sefer is on a table, you're not allowed to sit on the table. Or if a Sefer, not a Sefer, any Sefer, is on a bench, let's say, you're not allowed to sit on that bench even though you're sitting on the opposite side of the bench, but that's disrespectful to the Sefer that you're sitting, with your rear end on the same level as the Sefer Torah. So you have to, you're not allowed to put a Sefer on the floor, you're not allowed to hold a Sefer with disrespect, like they say, between, with your elbows. I mean, any sign of disrespect to a Sefer, any Sefer whatsoever, is halachically forbidden. Now, even putting svarim on top of, now it says in halacha like this: what happens if I'm learning and I have a few svarim, and I want to prop up one sefer that I'm learning to use another sefer to prop it up? So many opinions hold that you're allowed to do that because it's all in the learning process. You're learning. But let's say you're not allowed to use a sefer, to. Let's say it's sunny outside and you want to block the sun, so you want to take a sefer to block the sun. Or I know a lot of people do it, but really it's halachically questionable. Many people when a Sefer Torah walks by, they want to kiss the Sefer Torah. So they'll take a sefer, and they'll use it as an extension cord. That's disrespectful. Sefer is not an extension cord. You know, you want to extend your hand, you can't reach it, so you want to use the sefer. That's not the proper way of kissing a sefer Torah. The proper way of kissing a sefer Torah, either with your mouth or your hand or with a talus or whatever. But you don't use a sefer to make it easier to reach. Just think about it. It's disrespectful to this. Huh?
What's the woman doing?
With what?
This is the Torah.
A woman, again, technically they're allowed to kiss sefer Torah. You mean they're allowed?
Take the Torah out.
When you take a Torah out, you're not really supposed to bring it to the woman's side. Allah, most shuls do, but that doesn't mean it's right. There's a whole discussion halacha about that. But like when they bring in a new sefer Torah, the minig was that women kiss the sefer Torah. Simchas Torah, those are minig women kiss the sefer Torah. It's not a problem with women kissing sefer Torah. Now, what goes on what? Like you have a different svarim. So what goes on what? So let's say you have chumash. Okay? So chumash, I'm talking not about sefer Torah, I'm just talking about the svarim. A chumash goes on top of everything. In other words, if you have a chumash in a tilim, you put the chumash on the tilim, not the tilim on the chumash. Why? Because a chumash is chumash shechum Torah. Tilim is neviim and ksuvim. Now chumash, Torah is holier than neviim and ksuvim. So neviim would go on top of ksuvim, and Torah would go on top of neviim, but you can't put like a tilim on top of a chumash. Now, if you have a siddur, let's say, so a chumash doesn't go on top of it. A siddur does not go on top of a chumash. We're not talking, you want to look something up. Let's say you're learning chumash, and you have another sefer commentary on the chumash, and you put the sefer on top of the chumash. It's not a problem. It's all part of the learning process. I'm saying normally when you pile up svarim, so a chumash goes first, practically speaking, then a tilim, then a siddur, and then you have basically all the other svarim. By Chassidim, a Tanya was, let's not talk about that, a different caliber completely.
Does the siddur go on top of Gemara?
A siddur goes on top of a Gemara. You don't put a Gemara on top of a siddur, because it has Hashem's name written out properly, there's tefillas and all that. So there is an order of svarim, but after that, basically all svarim, there's no particular order of what goes on top of what, then they're all equal. But really, chumash, like when you pile up svarim, you're not allowed to put a siddur on top of a chumash, or, whatever it is. You have to make sure when you pile svarim one on top of the next, it's done in the right order.
So if you have a chitat, you put it on top of the siddur because you said
a chitas, which has chumash, tilim, and tanya, goes on top of a siddur because it has chumash in it and tilim in it. So then it's, and it has siddur in it, by the way, also.
Yeah.
So then it's not a question. Okay. What? Why not? No, that's not. The siddur is a din of a siddur, not a din of a tilim. By the way, it's another interesting thing. When you have an English siddur, okay? Now, what's interesting, the Hebrew is obviously holier than the English, right?
Yeah.
Now, so you're supposed to put the Hebrew on the right and the English on the left. Why? Because when you close the place, like this is 117, then the Hebrew of 117 is on top of the English of 117.
Yeah.
If you put the Hebrew here and the English here, then when you close the siddur, the English is on top of the Hebrew. You can't look at all the other pages. You look at this page itself. The Hebrew is more important than the English, right? So if you put the Hebrew on the right side, when you close the siddur, it's on top of the English of that page. The other way would be, the English would be on top of the Hebrew. Nothing, if you have a siddur like that, you can you can do it anyway, it's not a big deal. But l'chatchila, that's the way you do it. You're not allowed to put a sefer upside down. It's forbidden to put a sefer upside down, that's also disrespectful. There is even a very big shaila that a lot of poskim talk about like, well, what I'm doing now would be the same question. But a lot of rabbis get up in shul, so in front of the Aron Kodesh, they have where they speak, right? They have the standard, the thing, and you speak. So l'chayri, your back is facing the Aron Kodesh, which is seemingly disrespectful to with your back facing the Aron Kodesh. So a lot of places, before they get up to speak, they will kiss the pareiches, just to show that we're respecting. But the poskim right, it's not a problem, because you're not just standing with your back to the Sefer Teiros. First of all, it's a double cover, the pareiches and the actual cover. But in addition to that, when you get up to speak words of Torah, that's the honor of Torah. So you're not disrespecting Torah. On the contrary, you're speaking words of Torah, so that wouldn't be an issue at all. Okay, Sefer Torah that got ruined, you have to bury. It's a very interesting thing. A Sefer Torah that needs to be buried, you can't just bury it in the ground. Sefer Torah is unique. The Sefer Torah, they learn it out from a pasuk, that you have to take it and put it into an earthenware vessel, kli cheres, and then you bury it in the ground like that. You can't, all Sfarim you could just put into the ground for shemus. But the Sefer Torah, you have to put, it says in the pasuk, "L'man yamdu yomim rab," stand many days. So you have to put it in a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel, and then you bury it that way. But even Sfarim, once they get old, you're not allowed to throw them out. You have to put them into shemus. They have to be buried in the ground. Now, if somebody, okay, here's an interesting thing. Okay, you're not allowed to destroy Kisei Kodesh. If somebody physically takes a sefer and ruins it, they're desecrating, transgressing a biblical law of Leisasun Ken LaHashem Elokeichem. The pasuk says, when it speaks about idols, you have to destroy all the places of idol worshipping. And then the pasuk continues and says, Leisasun Ken LaHashem Elokeichem. You shouldn't do that to Hashem. So the Gemara learns out, if somebody destroys Sfarim, which is holy, you're desecrating a negative commandment. So there's a very interesting shaila that was asked. It was more relevant years ago than it is today. And that was, if somebody is in isolation in a hospital. This was asked by a lot of poskim. Rabbi Yosef Shusterman, earlier than him, there was a situation like this. A guy's in a hospital in isolation with a very, an illness that's very contagious. And the rule was that anything that was brought into that room, clothing or anything, has to be burnt before it leaves the room, that the epidemic shouldn't spread. Okay? So the question is, this was the question which was asked, if you're allowed to bring tefillin, or, that was the shaila of tefillin. The Ramesh also speaks about tefillin. If you're allowed to bring tefillin into such a place, because, the guy's going to be put on tefillin, but then you're going to have to burn the tefillin, which is a desecration of the tefillin. So there's a big machlekes in poskim. A lot of poskim said no, the Meisha says no, some poskim hold you could. It was a big argument in halacha. Today it's not that relevant, because people don't have that type of isolation that would make everything get burnt, so it's not that big of an issue. But I'm just saying that's the extent of it, of how far it goes. Now, therefore, you're also not allowed to erase the name of Hashem. So here we discussed in the past, this is a very practical question. Years ago, pre-cell phones, pre-computers, they used to have tape recorders. Okay, so now what happens if somebody taped? You wanted to teach a bar mitzvah kid the parsha for his bar mitzvah or haftorah. So what would the teacher would make a tape? Remember the cassette tapes? No, you won't remember. Too young for that. The cassette tapes and all that. The 8-track. Remember the 8-track? And then the large reels. Reel to reel. Yeah, I remember those. Anyway, so then they would tape the bar mitzvah parsha, and the kid would hear the tape over and over again. So now, am I allowed to erase that tape? Because the name of Hashem is in it. So I read a parsha, it's Hashem's name in there, so am I allowed to erase the tape? Huh? Okay, you heard the class already once before. So, halachically you're allowed to because there's no actual name of Hashem there. It's dots, So the Moshe writes it's better if you can tape over it. Instead of just erasing the tape, taping over that erases it anyway, but then you're indirectly doing it. You're not actively erasing it, you're actively taping and inactively, But you have the same shiloh with a computer, it's later. You have the same shiloh with a computer or your cell phone. Okay? You're davening mincha and you're scrolling up, right? Now what happens? When you scroll up, what happens to those words that were there?
They're gone.
They're gone. So the shaila is that called erasing Hashem's name? And don't tell me everybody does it and therefore it's allowed. I mean, it is allowed, but not because everybody does it. People do a lot of things they're not allowed to do. So the answer is, why in a computer screen can you close the computer or you can scroll up or down, seemingly be erasing Hashem's name along the way? And the reason why that's allowed, Poskim write, because computer writing is not actually written letters. It's a bunch of dots. It's a bunch of dots. It's not actually letters. It's written letters. To give you an example, if you take a Scrabble letters, or alphabet letters. We learned this many times. You take Scrabble letters or the alphabet serial, right? And you take the letters from a Scrabble set and you write G-O-D. You put the letters next to each other. Okay? So the name God is written. But that doesn't mean you're not allowed to take away the letters. You didn't write the name of Hashem. You put letters next to each other. But that's not called writing. So the same thing in a computer, when they have the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hashem's name, halachically it's not writing. It's a bunch of dots you put next to each other, and by erasing it, by scrolling up or closing the computer, all you're doing is actually separating the dots. What? One second. What?
Voice recorded is not right. In your previous question.
That's why we said halachically you could.
Somebody should say it's not.